law matters. Of course it does. Hi, I'm Debbie Moraes, your host and moderator. This program, as we tell you, has been created to educate, inform, and help you decide how to protect yourself, your family, and your business regarding legal matters. It's information and resources that'll help you manage some issues yourself. Of course, you'll also be better prepared to work with whatever professional counsel should you select. Of course, our goal always is to help you save time, money, and achieve the best possible results. Once again, we want to welcome and thank our attorney, David Bazar, from the Bazar & Associates law firm in East Providence, who continues to share his legal information and insights each session. And together, we want to welcome our special guest today, Rhode Island Secretary of State, Nellie Gorbea. Nellie, Secretary Gorbea, we're happy that you're with us. Recently, we've been covering topics related to COVID, wills and estates, personal injury, even the opening of schools. Today, our topic is voting. A national election is fast approaching. Not surprisingly, there are lots of legal and practical issues. Some are contentious, debated. Today, we're going to be providing you the information that you need to exercise your right to vote. We'll be discussing some of those debated issues and some of the controversies. And of course, November 3rd is coming, but there's a state election coming up first. We're thinking that there may be potentially long beyond the wait for election. We don't know about election results, but that too is debated. So apparently 100 million Americans did not vote in 2016. This is significant. And of course, there's much action afoot to make that change. So we want to think about having informed voters, not misinformed, disinformed, misled, suppressed, depressed. There's such a litany of things going on. We have the perfect group here to discuss what needs to happen and how we should make some changes. So let's begin by talking about the Secretary of State's job, and let's hear from the Secretary of State. Let's give us a background, if you would.
Yes, of course. Thanks, Deb. So the Secretary of State of Rhode Island is the chief state election official for federal purposes, but works very closely with two very important entities on the elections cycle. That's the State Board of Elections, which is a separate agency. A lot of people sometimes forget that. And then the local boards of canvassers. Every single city and town has a local board of canvassers. So the way I kind of give people a very short description is, I have the central voter registration system, and I protect that. We prepare the ballots. Once the ballots are prepared, then they go over to the Board of Elections. The Board of Elections then organizes the day of elections with each of the 39 local boards of canvassers. So election day is a little bit frustrating for me because pretty much what we do is just give information. It's the way Rhode Island is set up. If you move to another state, it's set up differently. And Rhode Islanders elect their Secretary of State. So sometimes I'll get the, do I work for the governor? I'm like, no, I work for you. I work for Rhode Island voters. So, but yeah, a lot of my time right now is spent on elections.
But that's not all that you do, right?
That's true. That's true.
It's a big part this time.
Yeah, it is a big part this time of the year, but I also have the State Archives and the State Library. The State Archives are these amazing holdings. They go back to the 1600s. And we've really worked hard to prepare a lot of educational material for teachers and homeschooling parents. So if you're watching this and you're wondering what to do with your kids, actually going on the Secretary of State's website for civic education type materials and Rhode Island history materials is great. We also, very importantly, have open government information. So every single public meeting, whether it be the local zoning board or the airport corporation or Rhode Island Housing, has to register its meeting minutes, its meeting notices with my office. You can sign up for emails to receive the notices of when something goes up and is getting processed. And we also have registration of lobbyists as well. So a lot of openness of government, transparency. And then finally, the Business Services Division, where basically if you have a business in Rhode Island, you have to incorporate, you incorporate through my office, and we've completely redone the way the business portal, the website, is. In fact, it was interesting because we had just announced 2 weeks before the shutdown from COVID, we announced a whole new, brand new business services portal. and just in time.
Yeah.
For everything to go online. So although we have closed our offices to, just random public, you have to do an appointment, if you have to see someone, the vast majority of people are just going online or to our call center. And we've done things like remote online notarization, which I know many attorneys are now using.
And
You've
so
had
I
that.
was going to start by thanking you for that, because when this pandemic first hit and I was president of the Bar Association, I had contacted your office, and you were phenomenal in getting that done. And we had started working with the governor's office, but they sort of pushed it aside and said, no, we can't do that. And you just took it right up and got it done very quickly and very well. And it helped real estate attorneys, estate planning attorneys, and anybody else who wanted to be able to help their clients but couldn't meet with them face to face because of what was going on. So at least they were able to continue to transact business that required notarizations that way. It was a really big help.
Yeah, no, thanks. And it came on the heels of work that we had just done last year with completely revitalizing or rewriting the public notary law.
Right.
That remote online notarization was the one thing we didn't do because we thought it was a little bit too cutting edge.
Yeah.
And then this pandemic hit, and I think in all of my years in government, that's the fastest project we've ever gotten implemented. It was like from the time we spoke to when it was up on the website with all the information, it was like 10 days.
Yeah, it was the speed of light for government.
And apparently there are 47 of the 50 states have secretaries of states, and I imagine that similar things go on. What happens if there isn't? Is there another, what would you imagine is another way that gets covered?
So it's lieutenant governors.
Lieutenant governor, okay.
Lieutenant governors can serve as lieutenant governor and secretary of state. Alaska has that. Puerto Rico has that. They just one or the other. Yep.
And of course, in Massachusetts, it's the Secretary of the Commonwealth rather than the Secretary of State, but same. So based on this conversation that you were just having with Secretary Gorbea about the ability to sign, what's going to happen, assuming fairly soon, hopefully soon, COVID may lift? How is that going to continue?
I assume that's something that's in place now for...
Well, no, it's actually only under emergency executive
correct.
orders. So the Bar Association, the realtors, everybody has to get their, oars
Right. Back in the water.
Back in the water.
Yep.
I have notified the General Assembly that it's very
Yep.
popular, that it's something that really we need to put into
Right.
law.
Yeah. And now that you mentioned that, I do recall that part of our discussion was, can we do it now? Yes, we have the emergency authority. And I think the governor weighed in and said, yes, under her authority with the COVID situation, that she agreed that this was appropriate and we could get it done that way.
Yep. Yeah, but we want to institutionalize it.
I think so.
As soon as we can, we need to put it back into the General Assembly and then
Right.
get it done.
And I find more and more attorneys and their clients, for some things, just find it works better that way. And it really works better that way for helping clients who are older or otherwise frail and don't want to leave their home or wherever they are, but they have access to Zoom and all of that, so you can see them, you can deal with them, but then you can notarize things online, so it really helps.
Online is wonderful. Let's talk about that, because when we're talking about voting, that has become an option. So Massachusetts has its way of having people vote online, register online. Secretary Gorbea, what can you share with us?
All right. Well, so I'm going to make a correction to what you just stated, because nobody has online voting.
Not voting, but
registration.
Sorry.
Yes. And
Thank
in
you.
fact, at the very beginning of my administration, it was one of the first things that I got done was online voter registration.
Yes.
And from there, we did automated voter registration. And those two pieces of legislation really have been really good at modernizing the maintenance of our voting lists. Our voting lists historically have been bloated, not because of huge amounts of fraud or anything. It's just people move, and they don't tell us.
Right.
And I cannot, as Secretary of State, move your, take a call from you, and you tell me, Mom, my kid just went away to college, they're not coming back. Well, that's great, but that your kid has to notify us, him, herself, or herself, so that we can move
when
them.
somebody moves, they notify the registry. Is that how it gets notified?
Now that's automated, absolutely. So now the automated voter registration process is, we've automated that process. So anybody who updates their address with the DMV, it's automatically going to go into the voter rolls. Huge step forward for a lot of people. Huge way to improve the accuracy of our voter rolls. and it's been great to do. But yeah, it's great. I've shown people the online voter registration tool is part of our suite of election information called vote.ri.gov. And through that, you can edit your voter information there. You can check out your sample ballot. Now we have a September 8th primary. Many communities, not all, but many communities have a primary. You can look at the ballot ahead of time. You can find your polling location. Polling locations for September 8th and November 3rd are going to be different, for sure. Do not go out into thinking that you're going to find the same one.
And are there options for people to vote earlier now?
Yes.
So you want to share a little of that information with us?
So we, because of the pandemic, we've really increased the options that people have for voting. You should not have to pay with your health for being able to vote. So we are now making sure that Rhode Islanders know you have 3 ways to vote in Rhode Island this year. You can vote from home and get a ballot mailed to you. You can mail it back, or you can put it in a drop box that's at City or Town Hall. You can vote early in person, which is another law that just got passed, which is not just for this year, but for going forward. For 20 days before a primary or a general election, you will be allowed to vote early in person, just like you would on primary day or on election day.
So how would that work? There would be certain designated places that you could go to?
What we're recommending is call your city or town hall, so they'll tell you exactly where it is. But yes, there'll be a location that the community decides. It has to be accessible to people with a variety of disabilities. And you'll come in and you show your ID. They'll check you off on the electronic poll book, which was another big advance that we may put into the process. And then you'll be given the ballot. You fill it out. You put it yourself in the voting machine, the voting tabulator, and you walk off. But we recommend that people call their city or town hall so that they can find out, are there particular hours where they're able to go in. Some communities do have limits on how many people can be in the place at the time. So that's the best thing.
And where they're actually doing it.
And where they're doing it, yes. And then finally, yes, there's September 8th or November 3rd. So the way we're describing it is you have to vote by September 8th or by November 3rd.
Yeah.
And similarly, we should point out that Massachusetts has a similar setup in that there's a website, an online resource that we will post for you shortly that allows you to check on your status, check on the polling places. Both Rhode Island and Mass have that, so check in on Mass as well. So I think it's probably time to talk about Rhode Island. You had a recent issue, Common Cause RI v. Nellie Gorbea. So please share with us. That's a little bit of a voting issue that has come up, and we should, if you'll explain that, and perhaps David can chime in there too with
the worst part of that whole case was seeing my name being sued against Common Cause, but that is our system.
Yeah, it is. And when a lawyer sues a city or town, there's a fellow who was the treasurer or whatever of Providence, and I think he got listed in more lawsuits than anybody in the state. So,
no, that's the way our system rolls. It's fine. I mean, I did it mine because I understood that that's what happens. So I tried very hard to change the law so that during this pandemic, individuals who wanted to vote from home could do so without having to also get their signatures notarized or have 2 witnesses. I mean, we're trying to limit, having people come to your door, having, extra people in your household. So it seemed like a reasonable measure to take this particular year. For whatever reasons, it didn't pass through the General Assembly, and so I was going to have to send out envelopes, oath envelopes with the ballots that required this. And as I was getting ready to prepare those envelopes, then we got sued by Common Cause, the League of Women Voters, and then 3 voters in Rhode Island who had different reasons why they were severely immunocompromised and really didn't feel comfortable either notarizing their signature or having 2 witnesses witness it. So ACLU ran the legal part of the case, and the minute that it hit our door, we looked at what they were saying, and Absolutely. We will enter into some sort of negotiation and consent decree. We went through the federal judiciary, which is where they had filed the suit. And just as we were filing the consent decree, the Republican National Committee and the Rhode Island GOP tried to intervene. The judge heard them, decided that they did not have standing to intervene. And so we proceeded and filed our consent decree and proceeded to order envelopes without the witnesses or the notary space in the envelopes. And all these things happen. I mean, you can't go to Kinko's or Staples somewhere and order these 3 weeks before or 2 weeks before.
Give me a couple million ballots and have them by tomorrow.
So the timeline was really, really harrowing. So then the Republican National Committee then sued us, went to the First Circuit Court of Appeals in Boston, where a 3-judge panel reviewed the case and again ruled against the Republican Party. And said that we could proceed. And they took us to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court, 6-3, actually weighed again in our favor. So it was a huge victory, I think, for voting rights, for making it easier for people to vote. And I know that there are people who are concerned that somehow they've heard that there could be more voter fraud. The security of the system was not those witnesses or the notary. It's actually in the verification of the signature by election officials. Yep. The application comes in to get a mail ballot, that gets reviewed at the local level. That local official will look at the information provided and the signature against that in the voter registration database. Once that's approved, then when the oath envelope comes back with the voted ballot, that second signature and information is also reviewed, but by a second group of people at the State Board of Elections. So you have 2 groups of people at the local and at the state making sure that that information matches what we have on record. And the State Board of Elections is included as an option for people, last 4 digits of your social or your driver's license number. Mm-hmm. And that's so that in case you think that your signature may have changed since, if our signature is from 10 years ago and you've now have some sort of disability or your hand isn't the same, then you have that other information, and they're able to say, yes, this is the right person.
Yeah, when I first registered, it was probably 1978 or something like that. I'm sure my signature has changed. Yep. So it makes sense that you can verify it in some other way as well. Yeah,
and actually it's very interesting. I mean, Rhode Island is a small state. So, we've had cases where somebody has called my office and said, before we had this measure, I have Parkinson's. My signature is definitely going to be different. Contact your local board of canvassers. Let them know. They will put a note in the file so that when your ballot envelope comes back, they can see, oh no, this person called. We understand. This is what's happening in this case. We can do that in Rhode Island. You can't do it in LA, but right. you can do it in Rhode Island.
So David, when Secretary Gorbea goes through this explanation, a lengthy one that outlines the process, does that not seem to be the way things should always go, in that you have a system of checks and balances, and that should be very reassuring to everyone?
Yeah, exactly the way to do it. And the whole point is to allow as many people to vote as are able to vote and should vote, and make sure the people who are voting are the ones who should be the ones voting. And the system is in place, that, as you described it, to make sure that all of those steps are followed, they get the opportunity, and that we can be sure that the people who are supposed to be voting are the ones voting.
Rhode Island proves that you can increase access to the ballot box while protecting the integrity of every single vote.
Right.
And that's something, in fact, when the Republican National Committee was trying to make its case and talked about the potential of voter fraud, the judges in Boston said, okay, give us a case. Like, where has this happened? And they couldn't. And our law, with this 2 signatures and notary requirement, the only other state in the country that had a similar requirement is Alabama. So we were really outliers. There are states like Washington State, Oregon, states on the West Coast that elect Republicans, elect Democrats. And their system is entirely mail ballot based. And it's not even you have to apply. You get a ballot mailed to you. Again, because there's checks and balances in receiving the ballot back and making sure that there's not double voting, that there's not other kinds of things happening.
So clearly, there's a concerted effort to get out the vote. I've seen, and maybe you can speak to the effort from your office or on behalf of the state. I certainly see online, I can't even list all of them, vote.ri.gov, but vote411.org, vote.org, rockthevote.org, and that's in one state. There are so many in other states. In addition to, as I was just sharing with Secretary Gorbea before we started, there are rock groups right now that are writing their own songs. Evanescence, I think, is the name of the group, using my voice or something. So there's clearly a concerted effort to get more people voting, and we know that there's also trouble on the other side of that regarding mail-in. But what are we doing around the state now to try to get people to register and know what they should do and how to do it?
So my office has had a huge communications campaign on social media, on radio, on TV, to try to promote people going to vote.ri.gov, getting informed. It's a lot of information. It's very hard for any one person, even myself. Like, I even come with my notes trying to remember, like, what are the different dates for which part of the process. You don't have to memorize it. You can go to vote.ri.gov and figure it out. However, in addition to that, we also have, just yesterday, announced a partnership with United Way's 211. You can dial 211 and ask for voter information from the 211 service. Or you can dial, if you want a direct line, you go 2119. So we have worked with United Way's call center to make sure that they're prepared to answer the variety of questions that we tend to get by voters about, you know, where's my polling location, or where do I go this? How can I do a mail ballot? How can I vote early in person? Right now, we are in the early in-person time period of the September 8th primary. So we have a lot of information about that because it's a fairly new process. So that, and I want to encourage people in particular to go to trusted sources. It gives me a little bit of heart palpitations when third parties, as well-intentioned as they are trying to promote the vote. Because in Rhode Island, we have a trusted source of information, which is vote.ri.gov.
You do, and I do want to get to this. There's the issue about suppression and depression. Those kinds of things, when people are going to online, especially because of COVID, they have plenty of time and more inclination to go Google searching, and things that apparently are to help you get information about candidates. Ostensibly, that may be true, and then after 2 or 3 weeks, when they've lured in a potential voter on that site, then there are things that are turning up, such as, no, you shouldn't be voting at all. How do you suggest people vet? How do you get to the credible sources? What do you say to people?
So first and foremost, go to vote.ri.gov. That is your trusted source for election information. We are working with federal partners, the cybersecurity agency out of the Department of Homeland Security, to monitor social media and various sites and ensure that there's not nefarious misinformation that's intentionally being done to suppress the vote. I was just yesterday at a classified briefing talking about the issues of misinformation or disinformation, and then the protections against hacking and other cyber attacks. My office, I'll have to say, I never thought that when I ran for Secretary of State, I would need security clearance. Yeah. Every single candidate from my time going, forward is going to have to do that as well. These are very different times.
Deb and I have often spoken and on these shows and told people, if you get an email, don't click into it and think that's where you're supposed to go to get information or trust what you're getting. Seek it out yourself. Put in the information yourself, like you said. Vote.ri.gov.
And sometimes it's not even, it can be nefarious for sure, but sometimes it's not. TurboVote is a perfect example. Great nonprofit organization with very good mission of trying to increase voter turnout. Was collecting people's information and never syncing with, as the states developed online voter information systems, never really syncing. And so the person would notify us, not TurboVote. TurboVote had an old address, would send the person a text saying, you need to go vote at this polling location. and it was the wrong one.
Right, 'cause-
not intentional.
Yeah.
But
And
yeah.
so that's the point is, even if it's not nefarious
Yep.
but to get the accurate information, go to the right place and don't rely on what you're getting sent to you. We always, when Christmas time, when we're doing our shows about avoiding scams and frauds and all of that, we always say, don't click into the email you received. Google, find the exact place where you want to go and make sure it's the right place.
And we've had to do this kind of training across the state. All 39 cities and towns, election officials. That was one of the things that we did back starting in 2017, a cybersecurity summit where we explained to town clerks, IT officials from the cities and towns, like all of the measures that we have in place and training that's going on as we speak now. City and town clerks, along with everybody who is an employee at the Secretary of State's office. It doesn't matter if you're a person who works at the state archives or in the business services division or in the elections division, because your phishing a scam can happen through anyone. And so we've really ramped up the awareness of our employees and all election officials of the importance of being certain of who it is that you're interacting with online.
Critical, and of course, as they're saying now, while they're doing Rock the Vote and Get Out the Vote, that the Black and Latino voters are persistent targets. And I think the LA Times wrote an expose, and it was covered in national news, about how they were misled and disinformed. And now there are many who are trying to correct that, but it certainly means beware. Need to be very careful about that. Let's speak about the U.S. Postal Service.
So before we leave, when you said multilingual, it just dawned on me. So 211, one of the benefits is that they have the capacity to answer questions in over 150 languages.
Wow.
Good to, that's impressive. Good to know.
Yep. Go ahead.
So please do address, in the brief amount of time that we have left, what about the U.S. Postal Service and drop boxes?
Yes.
Where do you stand on that?
So
Enlighten us.
again, we're fortunate that we're in Rhode Island. I can't speak to what happens in Texas or Minnesota or Wyoming, but in Rhode Island, I can absolutely tell Rhode Islanders that you can trust the system that we have in place. The good men and women of the post office here. We have spoken to the postmaster, not just this election, going back decades. When I was Deputy Secretary of State back in 2002 to 2006, every time we had a mailing, we connected with the Postal Service to make sure that it wouldn't get gummed up in the system, that we were doing the envelopes the right way, all this stuff. So we have had a long-standing relationship, my office, the Board of Elections, with the Postal Service in Providence. When this all started hitting, the news, my call was to the postmaster here in Providence. She answered my call within an hour. And I said, there's these news about mailboxes being moved. Have any mailboxes in Rhode Island been moved? And she said, absolutely not. Are there any problems that you expect that we'll have with regards to delivery of mail ballots? Nope, we don't. We're a small state. Again, I can't speak to other states and what's happening, but I can tell you that we have a good connection. Now, out of an abundance of caution, and because people watch cable news and they can't really necessarily differentiate Rhode Island from what's happening somewhere else, the Board of Elections has purchased drop boxes so that you can drop your mail ballot in any city or town. And by the way, if you live in Providence and you happen to be in Charlestown, you can drop it off in Charlestown. You don't have to drop it off in your own city and town. So that's a big clearing up.
Good to know. Thank you for sharing. Stay tuned, because there's certainly going to be an awful lot more news about that in the coming weeks. We thank you for staying tuned to The Law Matters. As we say, it matters to you. Thank you, Secretary Gorbea.
Thank you.